So, these We the People news. Okay. Trying to clean that up a little bit. All right. So, a couple of videos back. First, I got to say, this is educational purposes only. Okay. Do your own research. I'm not God. I'm not all knowing. They talked about how the people are the states, but where did he get that from? And I thought, well, timing is everything. And seen this video a couple of days ago, and had to track it down because of that previous video. This is going to give clarification of the people being the state. Okay, but it has broad definitions to it. But let's check out a little bit deep dive of the intent and history of the founding fathers.
Explain a little further here. James Madison, in his report of 1800, a couple of years later, he went into some detail explaining all the principles and the meanings of these resolutions of 1798. And he made very clear that the meaning of the word states in this context does not necessarily mean the plot of land or the state government in and of itself. He said, it is indeed true that the term states is sometimes used in a vague sense, and sometimes in different senses according to the subject to which it is applied. Thus, it sometimes means the
I'm going to interrupt that. If you do anything in your paperwork with this, you call the state absolute vague and ambiguous, absolutely no clarification of the definition.
Sections of territory occupied by the political societies within each, so the geographic area, sometimes the particular governments established by those societies, sometimes those societies as organized into those particular governments, and lastly, it means the people composing those political societies in their highest sovereign capacity. Sovereignty in the American system means final authority. And again, in that report, he's very clear.
Right? So how many times I've told you guys, men have natural rights, people have political power, okay, and sovereignty, right? So men and women are sovereign, but by extension of being one of the people of political power, the creator of our sovereignty, with the people of authority above the government.
The version of the word states, the context from the Virginia resolutions of 1798 is this. He said, in the present instance, whatever different construction of the term states in the resolution may have been entertained, all will at least concur in that the last mentioned, because in that sense the Constitution was submitted to the states. In that sense, the states ratified it, and in that sense of the term states, they are consequently parties to the compact from which the powers of the federal government result. Again, the states created the federal government, not the other way around. When you're saying that, you mean the people of the several states, not the state governments. And Madison was very emphatic and clear about that. Here's how John Jay described this relationship between the people of the several states, and their agent, the government. He said the Constitution only serves to point out that part of the people's business which they think proper by it to refer to the management of the persons therein designated. Those persons are to receive that business to manage not for themselves and as their own, but as agents and overseers for the people. I covered these concepts, these principles about sovereignty and government acting as an agent of the people of the states in an episode earlier this year. Sovereignty in the Constitution, government as agent of the people of the states. It'll be linked to in the show notes, and I should mention that Alan Mosley organizes a blog post for every episode, and in it you're going to find a show links or a show links section, reference links, where you can kind of go along with the things that I'm pointing out in this episode. Obviously, we're primarily looking at James Madison's Virginia Resolutions of 1798, his report of 1800, but I've got a bunch of other original source documents from Dickinson, Hamilton, this other episode I just mentioned, and the like. And that way you can read and learn more in context on your own time, because I'm just scratching the surface. Again, Alan Mosley will get that organized, and I will get it published over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty in just a couple of hours after this live stream is done. So let's move on. Number 4 is the danger of precedent. And we're not just talking about precedent, stare decisis on the court system, the precedent of going beyond the limits of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson in 1791, when he was railing against Alexander Hamilton's First National Bank, the Bank Bill, he said to take a single step beyond the limits of the Constitution is, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing, giving them a boundless field of power. Because once you establish the precedent that they are authorized to do something that they're not authorized to do, there is no real limit to their power at all. Now, anyways, back to James Madison's.
Yeah, sit and think about that, people. Facebook don't like free speech. So, as president, that they keep shutting people down, as well as UT.
Virginia Resolutions of 1798, that this state, having by its convention, which ratified the federal Constitution, he's referencing the Virginia Ratifying Convention, their ratification documents, made some things pretty clear about their views of how things were supposed to be. They expressly declared, quote, that among other essential rights, the liberty of conscience and of the press cannot be canceled, abridged, restrained, or modified by any authority of the United States. Madison continued, and from its extreme anxiety to guard these rights from every possible attack of sophistry or ambition, recognizing that people with power are definitely going to go after the liberty of conscience and of the press, because if you can't think and speak, and you can't speak out and print and communicate with others the stuff that the government is doing that they're not supposed to be doing, well, government's going to get away with a ton of things. So there was an extreme anxiety to guard these rights. He said, having with other states recommended an amendment for that purpose. First Amendment, of course, which amendment was in due time annexed to the Constitution. He said it would mark a reproachful inconsistency and criminal degeneracy if an indifference were now shown to the most palpable violation of one of the rights thus declared and secured, and to the establishment of a precedent which may be fatal to the other. So, sit
and think about that, right? So when you got these courts of them auditors and cop watchers and all that, Florida, for instance, 25 feet away. Well, government in Florida passed that 25-foot law. But that is criminal. That law is a criminal offense against the people's rights.
DR, too long didn't read Madison here. If you let them get away with violating any part of the Bill of Rights, any part of the Constitution, any amount of your liberty, this establishes a precedent for them to do the same to other liberties, to other freedoms, to other parts of the Bill of Rights. And we shouldn't be surprised that allowing that to happen leads to, well, the largest government in the history of the world. 2 years prior to this, George Washington had a very similar observation and warning in his farewell address, 1796. It was first drafted by James Madison in 1792, reworked by Hamilton in 96, but here's how he put it. If, in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates. So, Washington's saying, look, if you think they need more power, he's not saying go do it, but if the people of the states think this needs to happen, there's a process in the Constitution to make it happen. But, he said, let there be no change by usurpation. So, if you want to expand the power, go for an amendment. But don't just let them exercise the power anyways. That's a usurpation of power. That's a theft of power from the sovereign people of the several states. St. George Tucker later called usurpation treason against the sovereignty of the people, injuries and usurpations. That's the real term, or abuses and usurpations. These are the terms that were actually used in the Declaration of Independence rather than what we call them grievances. So Washington said, let there be no change by usurpation, for though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. So usurpation of power, exercising additional power beyond the limits of the Constitution, is a weapon to destroy freedom. The precedent...
Yeah, because then what? The 1947 Administrative Act, right? Put everybody in administrative to bypass the Constitution. Okay? That's usurpations. They're violating the Constitution against the people by putting us in some form of corporate bylaws. All right? I call it bypass, but they put it in a form of a bylaw.
He said, must always greatly overbalance in permanent evil any partial or transient benefit which the use can at any time yield. Again, another TLDR. The short version is, even if you like the results of them doing stuff they're not supposed to do, you have to continue opposing it, because if you don't, you've established a precedent and permanent evil. So next up is number 5. Consolidation is tyranny. Here, first, Madison points out...
There's
destructive. And number...
I thought it would be in this one. Okay. I don't know which show it was or anything, so pardon me. If you want the original definition of the Constitution, then you got to go back in the day of dictionaries. Okay? Black law did not exist with the original Constitution. And Webster did not exist in the definitions of that time. And dictionaries change over a period of time. So if you want to get the original definitions of the words they speak of in our Constitution, then you got to use that definition. You got to use their books at that time. Black law doesn't. Now you can use black law of today's version of the process, but if you're challenging the constitutionality of it, you're going to actually have to have the original definition in that day and time and combat the black law definition to whatever processes they're using against you today. Because the most important thing about the Constitution is the intent. And the words they speak is the definitions of the books they did use at that particular time. Not today's time, when they changed everything. Okay? So, if you're going to do a constitutional, everybody keeps using Black's Law, Webster. No. You got to go back with the original definitions of the original time, at the original place, and the original manner. Okay? And then you can go ahead and dispute the Constitution. It's kind of hard to use Black's Law definition when it didn't exist in the original intent of the words. Just saying. It defeats the purpose. These are We the People News. Bye, y'all.